Part 1. My name is Ryan, and until recently, I believed I had the perfect life. I was married to Emma, the woman I'd loved since college. She was beautiful, smart, and the kind of woman who could light up any room she walked into. We were the couple everyone envied, the kind that seemed to have it all figured out. We lived in a beautiful house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, shared inside jokes, and made plans for the future, a future that included kids, vacations, and growing old together. I always considered myself a lucky man. Emma was my best friend, my confidant, and the only person who truly understood me. We had been together for almost a decade, married for 5 years, and not once did I ever doubt her loyalty or love. She was everything I could have ever wanted, and I worked hard to provide her with the life she deserved. But life has a funny way of shattering illusions. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the day that everything I knew about my marriage was turned upside down. I was cleaning out Emma's car, something I did every couple of weeks as a small gesture to show my appreciation. She was meticulous about her things but never seemed to have the time to get around to the car, so I always took it upon myself. It was a mundane task, one I never thought twice about, until that day. As I reached under the passenger seat, my fingers brushed against a small object. I pulled it out, confused at first by the shiny foil. It took me a second to realize what it was, an empty condom wrapper. My heart stopped. My mind went blank. We didn't use condoms. Emma had been on birth control since before we were married. There was no logical reason for this to be in her car. I stared at the wrapper, my mind racing with 1,000 scenarios, each one worse than the last. I sat there, frozen in place, the world around me fading away. Memories started to flood my mind, the late nights at the gym, the sudden text messages she would receive and answer with a little too much secrecy, the occasional nights she came home later than usual, explaining it away as just losing track of time with the girls. At the time, I never questioned it. I trusted her completely. But now, holding that wrapper in my hand, everything started to seem suspicious. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe one of her friends borrowed the car? Maybe it was old, and she didn't realize it was there? But deep down, I knew better. Emma was meticulous. She cleaned out her purse weekly and organized her closet seasonally. There was no way she would have missed something like this. I felt sick to my stomach. My hands were shaking, and my chest tightened as a cold wave of fear washed over me. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that the woman I loved, the woman I planned to spend the rest of my life with, could betray me like this. I shoved the wrapper into my pocket, quickly finishing the cleaning job without letting myself think. I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to confront her, but I knew I couldn't do it yet. I needed more information. I needed proof. The rest of the day was a blur. I pretended everything was fine, laughed at her jokes, and even watched a movie with her that night. But inside, I was falling apart. Every time she smiled at me, my chest ached. Every time she touched me, I felt nauseous. I could barely look at her without wanting to scream. I spent that night wide awake, lying next to her, listening to her steady breathing as she slept peacefully, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to shake her awake, to demand answers, to make her tell me that it was all just a misunderstanding. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. If she was cheating, then she was already lying to my face. I needed to know who it was, how long it had been going on, and if I was just another fool who didn't see the signs. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. I hated myself for it, felt sick to my core for betraying her privacy, but I couldn't help it. I had to know. But there was nothing. No suspicious texts, no secret apps, no hidden photos. If she was hiding something, she was doing a damn good job of it. But I wasn't going to give up that easily. I started paying closer attention to her behavior, noting every little thing that seemed off. She was still affectionate, still attentive, still the Emma I'd always known. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she seemed distant, distracted. Moments when she'd check her phone and smile just a little too long before locking it and putting it away. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but now that I was looking for it, I couldn't ignore it. My mind raced with questions. Who was she texting? Where was she really going when she said she was at the gym? And most importantly, who was she using that condom with? I needed answers, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get them. This was just the beginning. I had no idea how deep the betrayal went, but I was determined to find out, even if it destroyed me. Part 2. The days that followed were torture. I was living with a stranger, a woman who wore my wife's face but was hiding secrets behind her perfect smile. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time Emma touched me, I flinched. I was trapped in my own mind, drowning in suspicion and jealousy, haunted by the image of her with someone else. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make her confess to whatever she was hiding. But I knew better than to confront her without proof. I became obsessed. I watched her every move, analyzed every word she said, searching for cracks in her story. I started keeping track of her schedule, noting the days she went to the gym, the nights she came home later than expected. I paid attention to her phone habits, how she kept it close, face down on the table, always locked. She never used to be that guarded. I knew I needed to dig deeper, but I couldn't do it alone. That's when I called Jason. We'd been best friends since high school. He was the only person I could trust, the only one who would understand without judgment. When I told him about the condom wrapper, he was silent for a long time before finally saying, "Man, I really hope there's an innocent explanation for this, but you have to find out the truth." Jason offered to help me set up a tracker on her phone. I hated the idea. It felt wrong, like I was sinking to a new low, invading her privacy in a way that made me feel dirty. But I needed to know. If she was cheating, then she'd already betrayed my trust. I needed to protect myself. We set it up the next day while she was in the shower. My hands were shaking as I installed the app, my heart racing as I navigated her phone. I felt sick, disgusted with myself, but I couldn't stop. I needed answers. The tracker showed me everything, her location, her texts, even her call history. I told myself I would only check it once, just to see if there was anything unusual. But once turned into twice, then 3 times, then every hour. I was addicted, constantly refreshing the screen, waiting for a clue, a name, a message that would finally reveal the truth. For days, there was nothing. Just her usual routine: work, gym, home. She texted her friends, her mom, even me. There was no sign of another man, no evidence of an affair. I started to doubt myself, to wonder if I was going crazy, seeing things that weren't there. Maybe the condom wrapper was old. Maybe it wasn't hers. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then, one Thursday night, everything changed. Emma texted me around 6, saying she was going to grab dinner with her friend Megan after the gym. It seemed normal enough, but something about the way she worded it made my skin crawl. I checked the tracker and saw that she was still at the gym, just like she said. But an hour later, she wasn't at the restaurant where she and Megan usually went. She was across town, at a place I didn't recognize. I watched the screen, my heart pounding as her dot stayed in the same spot for over an hour. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she meeting someone? Was she lying to me again? I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and drove across town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, I parked a block away and walked toward the address. It was a small apartment complex, quiet and unassuming. I stood there, staring at the building, trying to gather the courage to go inside. But I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might find. I stayed outside, hidden behind a tree, watching the door like some kind of stalker. I hated myself for it, but I needed to see. I needed to know the truth. I waited for what felt like hours, my heart racing every time I heard footsteps. Then, just as I was about to give up, the door opened. Emma walked out, her hair wet like she'd just taken a shower. She was smiling, her face glowing in a way that made my stomach turn. I watched as she turned back toward the doorway, and a man followed her out. He was tall, muscular, with dark hair and a smug smile. He leaned down, kissed her on the lips, and my world shattered. I stumbled back, my vision blurring as pain ripped through my chest. I felt like I was going to be sick. I wanted to run over there, to punch that bastard in the face, to scream at her and demand answers. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my legs numb, my heart broken. I watched as she kissed him again, laughing at something he said before walking to her car. She looked happy, carefree, like she didn't have a husband waiting for her at home. I waited until she drove away before stumbling back to my car. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what I had just seen. She was cheating on me. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. I felt a rage unlike anything I'd ever known. I wanted to destroy something, to make her feel the pain she just inflicted on me. But more than anything, I wanted answers. I wanted to know how long this had been going on, why she did it, how she could look me in the eye every day and lie to my face. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions I didn't know how to ask. When I walked through the door, Emma was already there, smiling as she set the table for dinner. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with that familiar warmth, and for a moment, I almost believed she was still the woman I fell in love with. But she wasn't. Not anymore. She was a liar. A cheat. And I was going to make her tell me everything. Part 3. I stood there, staring at Emma as she moved around the kitchen, humming softly as if nothing had changed. She had no idea that I knew. No idea that I'd watched her kiss another man, that I'd seen her walk out of his apartment looking happier than she had in months. The sight of her disgusted me. I wanted to scream, to accuse her, to throw everything off the table and demand the truth. But I held it in. I needed more. She looked up at me and smiled, that same sweet smile she'd given me 1,000 times before. Hey, babe. Dinner's almost ready. How was your day? I choked back the anger that was clawing at my throat. It was fine, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Just a long day at work. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek, her lips soft and warm. I fought the urge to pull away, to wipe her touch off my skin. I felt sick. How many times had she kissed him like that? How many times had she smiled at him with the same look of love she was giving me now? We ate dinner like nothing was wrong. I forced myself to make conversation, to laugh at her jokes, to act like I hadn't just seen my whole world fall apart. Every word out of her mouth felt like a lie. Every time she looked at me, I wondered how she could do it, how she could be so good at pretending. That night, as she curled up next to me in bed, her body warm and familiar against mine, I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene over and over again. Her lips on his. Her smile. The way she looked at him, so full of joy and affection. It was killing me. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to throw her off me, to demand that she tell me everything. But I didn't. I stayed silent, my body rigid as she fell asleep beside me. I listened to her breathing, steady and peaceful, completely unaware that I knew her secret. I waited until I was sure she was asleep before slipping out of bed and quietly leaving the room. I went to the kitchen, my hands trembling as I poured myself a glass of whiskey. It burned going down, but I didn't care. I needed something to numb the pain, to quiet the thoughts that were tearing me apart. How could she do this to me? How long had she been lying to me? Was he the only one, or were there others? I slammed the glass down on the counter, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. I wouldn't let her break me. I wouldn't let her see how much she'd hurt me. I had to be strong. I had to get answers. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her. I told her I was working late and watched as she left the house, gym bag slung over her shoulder, just like always. I waited a few minutes before getting in my car and trailing her from a safe distance. My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty as I followed her across town, trying to stay out of sight. She pulled into the gym parking lot, just like she always did. For a moment, I almost believed her, almost convinced myself that I was wrong. But then she walked inside, and less than 5 minutes later, she walked out again, her hair tucked under a baseball cap, her gym bag replaced with a different purse. I watched as she got into her car and drove away, my chest tightening as I realized what she was doing. She'd never even planned to work out. The gym was just her cover, her alibi. She was meeting him again. I followed her to the same apartment complex, parking a few buildings away where she wouldn't see me. I watched as she walked up to his door, her steps light and eager, her face lighting up when he opened it. He pulled her inside, his hands on her waist, his mouth on hers before they even crossed the threshold. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone in my car, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I sat there for hours, watching the door, waiting for her to come out. I told myself I would leave, that I'd seen enough, but I couldn't move. I needed to see her face, needed to look her in the eyes and see if she felt any guilt, any shame. I needed to know if she was sorry for what she was doing to me, or if she felt nothing at all. When she finally came out, it was dark. She looked the same as she had the night before, her hair wet, her face glowing, her lips swollen from his kisses. She walked to her car without a care in the world, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching. I followed her home, my mind numb, my heart shattered. When she walked through the door, she gave me the same smile, the same warm greeting. She kissed me on the lips, her mouth soft and sweet, and I nearly threw up. I could taste him on her, could feel his hands on her skin, his touch still lingering. I wanted to scream, to shove her away, to demand that she tell me how she could do this to me. But I didn't. I smiled back, pretending I didn't know, pretending that everything was fine. I needed more time. I needed to figure out my next move. That night, as she lay beside me, her body curled against mine, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing how much she'd hurt me. No, I was going to play the part of the clueless husband, the loving, loyal fool who didn't suspect a thing. And then, when she least expected it, I was going to make her pay. This wasn't just about getting answers anymore. It was about revenge. Part 4. Over the next few days, I perfected my act. I became the husband she thought she knew, attentive, loving, completely oblivious. I brought her flowers, took her out to dinner, made love to her with all the passion I could muster, even though touching her made my skin crawl. I played my part flawlessly, and she didn't suspect a thing. She was too wrapped up in her lies, too confident in her ability to deceive me. But behind the facade, I was planning. Every smile I gave her, every kiss, every laugh, it was all part of my strategy. I was going to make her believe that she had gotten away with it, that she was safe. And then I was going to destroy her. I started gathering evidence. I went through her phone every chance I got, taking screenshots of texts and saving them to my own device. I hacked into her email, her social media accounts, even her bank statements. I wanted to know everything. How long this had been going on, how often she saw him, how much money she was spending on her little affair. I wanted every dirty detail. I followed her every time she went to see him, watching from a distance as she laughed and flirted, her face lighting up with a joy she hadn't shown me in months. I took photos, videos, documenting every kiss, every embrace. I saved it all, creating a folder on my computer labeled Truth, a cruel reminder of the lies she had been feeding me. I learned his name was Tyler Jacobs. He was a personal trainer at her gym, 5 years younger than me, the kind of pretty boy who probably spent more time looking in the mirror than actually working out. He was nothing special, just some punk who had the misfortune of getting involved with my wife. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The more I watched them together, the more I hated her. She looked so carefree, so happy, like she didn't have a care in the world. I was nothing more than a convenience to her, a placeholder while she played out her little fantasy. She was living a double life, and she was damn good at it. But I was better. I spent my nights awake, planning my revenge. I wasn't just going to confront her. No, that would be too easy. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to feel the same pain she'd inflicted on me, to lose everything she'd taken for granted. Her perfect life, her perfect marriage, I was going to burn it all to the ground. I started by isolating her. It was subtle at first, making excuses to avoid seeing her friends, planting little seeds of doubt about their loyalty. I heard Megan was talking about you behind your back. I'd say casually, watching as her face fell. She's probably just jealous. Emma would nod, her eyes darkening with suspicion. It was almost too easy. I made sure she was always too busy to see them, keeping her occupied with date nights, weekend getaways, spontaneous plans that she couldn't refuse without seeming ungrateful. Slowly but surely, I was cutting her off from her support system, making sure that when the truth came out, she would have no one to turn to. Next, I went after her reputation. I started spreading rumors at her workplace, anonymously of course. I made sure they were just subtle enough to be believable. Whispers about her being flirtatious, unprofessional, unreliable. I watched as her coworkers started to distance themselves, as her boss became more critical, more suspicious. It was beautiful. She began to feel the pressure. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she hesitated before leaving for work, in the way she clung to me a little tighter at night. She was starting to unravel, and I was loving every second of it. But the real blow was yet to come. I was saving the best for last. I tracked down Tyler's girlfriend. Her name was Jessica, and she was beautiful, long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. I contacted her anonymously, sending her the photos and videos I'd taken, detailing every sordid detail of her boyfriend's affair with my wife. I watched from a distance as her world crumbled, as she confronted Tyler, screaming at him on the front lawn before throwing his things out the window. It was poetic justice. Emma noticed the change. She became distant, paranoid, constantly checking her phone, her smile fading as she struggled to reach Tyler. He was ignoring her, too busy trying to piece his life back together after I'd torn it apart. I could see the frustration, the fear in her eyes. She was losing control, and she had no idea why. I watched her fall apart, day by day, piece by piece. I pretended to be supportive, holding her as she cried, whispering reassurances while secretly reveling in her misery. It was intoxicating, knowing that I was the one pulling the strings, that she was trapped in a web of lies of her own making. Then, when she was at her lowest, I made my move. It was a Friday night. She came home late, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked exhausted, defeated, like the life had been drained out of her. She barely spoke during dinner, picking at her food in silence. Afterwards, as she sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, I stood in front of her and dropped my phone on the coffee table. The screen was lit up, displaying a video of her kissing Tyler outside his apartment. Her face went pale, her eyes widening in shock as she watched herself on the screen, completely exposed. I watched as the realization hit her, as her world came crashing down around her. She looked up at me, her eyes filling with tears, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. But no words came out. There was nothing she could say. I leaned in, my voice cold and steady as I said the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. I know everything. She burst into tears, collapsing into sobs as I stood over her, my heart cold and unfeeling. I watched her break, watched the woman I once loved crumble into nothing. It was over. Or so I thought. Part 5. Emma broke down completely. She was on her knees, sobbing, her body shaking as she clutched at my legs, begging for forgiveness. Her words were jumbled, incoherent, a mess of apologies and excuses. She tried to explain, saying it was a mistake, that she never meant to hurt me, that she still loved me. But her words meant nothing. They were as empty as the promises she'd been making to me for months. I looked down at her, feeling nothing but cold contempt. This woman, this liar, this cheat, she was nothing to me now. The love I once felt for her was gone, burned away by her betrayal. All that was left was anger, hatred, and the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. I pulled away from her grasp, her hands slipping off me as I stepped back. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, her eyes pleading. "Ryan, please. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed through the room. "You didn't mean for this to happen? You didn't mean to cheat on me? To lie to my face every single day?" I shook my head, my fists clenching as I struggled to control the rage building inside me. "You're pathetic." She flinched, her shoulders shaking as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I was confused. I was lonely. You were always so busy with work, and Tyler, he made me feel special. I know it was wrong, but it didn't mean anything. It was just a stupid fling. A fling. My voice was cold, sharp as a knife. You destroyed our marriage for a fling? You betrayed me, humiliated me, for some meaningless affair. I could feel the anger boiling over, my vision blurring with red. Do you have any idea what you've done? You ruined everything. She broke down again, her sobs echoing through the room as she buried her face in her hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Ryan, I love you. I love you more than anything. Don't leave me. Don't throw us away." I stared at her, my heart hardening at her words. "You threw us away the moment you walked into his apartment. You made your choice, Emma. You chose him over me, over us. And now you have to live with the consequences." I turned away from her, walking toward the bedroom to pack my things. I could hear her scrambling to her feet. Her footsteps hurried as she followed me. "Ryan, wait. Please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. I'll do anything. Just, please don't leave me." I ignored her, pulling out a suitcase and throwing my clothes inside. She tried to stop me, grabbing my arm, her fingers cold and desperate against my skin. "Ryan, please. I can't lose you. I can't. I don't want to live without you." I yanked my arm away, my voice low and icy. "You should have thought of that before you spread your legs for another man." She gasped, her face crumpling as my words hit her like a slap. "I know I hurt you. I know I made a terrible mistake. But please, Ryan, I'm begging you, give me another chance. I'll make it right. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I zipped up my suitcase, my jaw clenched as I fought back the wave of emotion threatening to break through. "I gave you everything, Emma. My heart, my trust, my life. And you threw it all away. There's no fixing this. There's no coming back from what you did." She collapsed onto the bed, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed uncontrollably. I watched her for a moment, my chest tight, my heart aching despite everything. I had loved her. I had loved her more than I'd ever loved anyone. But that love was gone, shattered by her lies, her betrayal. I grabbed my suitcase and walked out of the bedroom, out of the house that had once been my home. I could still hear her crying as I closed the door behind me, the sound muffled by the walls that were now just as empty as my heart. I drove away without looking back. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't stay there, couldn't stay with her. Not after everything she'd done. The days that followed were a blur. I stayed with Jason, spending my nights drinking myself into oblivion, trying to numb the pain that refused to go away. I was angry, heartbroken, lost. My life was in ruins, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. Emma called me every day, begging me to come home, to talk to her, to forgive her. I ignored every call, every message. I couldn't face her. Not yet. Then one day, the call stopped. I expected to feel relief, but all I felt was emptiness. She was really gone. My marriage was over. My life as I knew it was over. I spent weeks trying to move on, trying to forget. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get her out of my head. I kept replaying everything over and over, wondering where it all went wrong, wondering if there was something I could have done to stop it. I thought about revenge, about making her pay for what she did. But in the end, I realized it didn't matter. Nothing I did would change the past. Nothing would undo the pain she'd caused. I filed for divorce a month later. She didn't contest it. She signed the papers without a fight, leaving me with the house, the cars, everything. It was almost too easy, like she was just as desperate to end it as I was. I moved on, or at least I tried to. I went back to work, tried to rebuild my life piece by piece. But no matter how much time passed, the pain never went away. The betrayal never stopped hurting. I don't know if I'll ever be the same again. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone the way I trusted her. But I do know one thing, I survived. She tried to break me, but I'm still here. Still standing. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it. Alone, if I have to. Because I'd rather be alone than live a lie. The end.